Hello, hello. Welcome back to Let's Talk Ray Bradbury, the show here on Let's Talk Entertainment, where beginning way back in 2018, I began the long project of trying to locate, read, and review each of the roughly 600 short stories written by Ray Bradbury in his very long career. Today we're up to story number 281, which is also the 22nd of 25 stories in his 2002 collection, One More Further Road. Today's story is the F.Scott Tolstoy Ahab Accumulator. Yeah, that's a mouthful. The story does appear to possibly be a sequel to another story, but I read, earlier this year, perhaps late last year, which was the John Wilkes Booth Warner Brothers MGM NBC Funeral Train, which may hold the record for the longest Ray Bradbury title. I'm not quite sure. If you're new to the channel, the way that these reviews work is I do a brief synopsis of what happens in the story, and then I wrap it up with just a very light analysis of what it means, what I take away from it. Is it a good story? And I mainly do this for my own entertainment, for my own enrichment, and sort of to say that I've read all these stories and then be able to look back at these videos and see what I thought and sort of compare my notes if I ever read the story again. So on to that synopsis. The narrator is in a library with his friend named Billy Barlow. For some reason, we don't get a name for the narrator himself, but we do get his friend Billy Barlow, who is barely in the story. Barlow asks him why he now wants to use his time machine for something other than getting new books written. In the other story, which again I assume is a prequel or a sequel, whatever, he took his time machine back in time and he rounded up all of these movie executives who were sort of monopolizing the time of F.Scott Fitzgerald, and ultimately resulted in him not being able to finish his final book before he died. So he went back there, he cleared all those guys out of the way, and it ended up that when he came back to his present in the future, he found that the book had in fact been completed. So Barlow asked him, why do you want to change the purpose of your time machine? It's one thing to go back in time and get a book finished, but now you want to make these authors happy, and that's strange because he says that authors, they're all miserable. It's sort of part of their craft. All great art is made through suffering, someone once said. But he wants to do it, so he hops into his time machine, and in successive scenes, he fails to stop Hemingway from killing himself. He can't get Herman Melville from going back, or can't get Herman Melville to leave the shore and go back to the sea where he was most happy, but he does manage to pry Tolstoy away from his very unpleasant wife. And then he goes back to the present in the library, and he reports to his friend Billy that he has a 1-2 record. He failed to protect 2 of them, but he did get Tolstoy away from his wife. And this would be a little bit more enjoyable to me if I knew the lives and the biographies of these characters a little bit better. I have read their works, not as extensively as perhaps I would like, but I'm familiar with their lives a little bit, but not enough to where this story had that much meaning for me. For Bradbury, of course, these were his favorite authors, and I sort of think it's interesting that he chose to write this story. I would say overall it's an exhilarating story. It's very fast-paced, as Bradbury often does, but it's ultimately not a very important story. We've heard this one before about artists being miserable, but I do understand Bradbury's sort of compulsion to want to give them happier lives and to sort of in theory, the result being that if they were happier, if they lived longer, they would write more books. But of course, there's this counterpoint, which is that the books wouldn't be any good if they were happier. It's the misery that sort of breeds the will to sit down and sort of pour yourself into a work and, spend your time at a desk in a dark room by candlelight in some cases, writing. And by all accounts, as far as I know, Bradbury led a pretty happy life. And I think that ultimately what we're talking about here is this sort of cliche about all authors being miserable. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think it's their untimely deaths that sort of add to their infamy. So we have this morbid fascination with people who are miserable and with their deaths and their unhappy times. And I think that causes us to sort of create this mythology where only the suffering ones can write great things. And it's all playing around with this cliche. I'm sure Bradbury is aware that this is sort of not true, because by all accounts, it looked like Bradbury led a long, happy life, and he did write a lot of great works of his own. So there you have it. Not a top-tier Bradbury story, but it is amusing. Take you a couple minutes to read. No big deal. Nothing lost if you do read it. But yeah, there you have it. The F.Scott Tolstoy Ahab Accumulator. Next time, we'll be looking at another story with a long title that will be difficult to get onto a thumbnail. Well, what do you have to say for yourself? ? And then that leaves just 2 more stories in one more for the road, and then the show will go on another break. Not sure how long, while I pursue some other interest here on the channel, but we will be back. Eventually, we will read all of the roughly 600 short stories written by Ray Bradbury, but that's becoming a more difficult process to sort of find the stories and not accidentally do repeats, but it's been fun. So there you have it, guys. Thank you, and I'll see you again soon.